It matters what you do with your suffering. Because sometimes people will go through suffering and come out with compassion, and sometimes they'll go through suffering and come out with bitterness and resentment.
Which is completely what we want to talk about today. Suffering is inevitable in life, but the outcome of it doesn't always have to be destructive, even though it feels really rough when you're in the middle of it. But hopefully today we can talk a little bit about some ways of looking at suffering that maybe you can focus a little more on the outcome rather than just losing yourself in the pain that you're in at the moment.
Please understand that we're not trying to trivialize or minimize what you're going through, as we've both been through this and remember the pain very, very well. We both believe that this is one of the greatest pains a person on this earth can endure. And so we're very, very sorry that you're going through it. And as we talk about it, please know that our hearts are with you.
Some people respond better to suffering than others. Again, it's largely dependent upon what the people do with the same suffering that comes to them. For example, if you've ever been to a nursing home, you'll very quickly, I think, see two groups of people. You'll see one group that, despite sometimes horrific medical conditions or the loss of their eyesight or whatever it may be, are experiencing a tremendous sense of peace and are friendly and jovial and still love their lives. And you'll see others who've taken their suffering, and their suffering just made them very bitter and very angry and resentful, and they're still, talking about things that happened years ago to them, and they haven't been able to let it go. And again, that's a result of what we do with our suffering. Sometimes suffering does seem to undo people, or they make some destructive decisions with it, and it forever alters the trajectory of their life.
You are suffering because somebody has done something extremely painful to you. And I don't want you to minimize that experience or heap lots of blame and shame on yourself, which a lot of times people do. I want you to realize that this is something horrific that has happened to you. And for that, we do have great sadness and compassion. In a strange way, you might see yourself as a victim, and I'm okay with that. The thing that I think sometimes gets tricky for people is they were raised in an atmosphere where they were told to not have self-pity. And so they're concerned about being in their pain and embracing their suffering because they have a fear that they're going to get stuck there. I don't have a fear that you're going to get stuck there. Sometimes people will put blame on you, and sometimes people will put shame on you. And as you learn and grow and maybe consider things that you wish you had done or wish you hadn't done, please realize that it's important to care for your pain. And sometimes I'll tell people, please go ahead and have a pity party. Just invite company. And so just invite the people who are trustworthy into that process with you. And if you do, you're not going to get stuck there.
And while we mentioned some other ideas in the book, I guess, we won't go through all of them here, but I want to spend a little bit time on one more. And that's the critical idea that suffering and taking us to the end of our rope sometimes is the very thing that turns us to something bigger than ourselves. For the Christians out there, this something is obviously God. For those of you who are not rooted in a faith identity, that higher power, that bigger thing might be love or hope or community. Wherever you're coming from, philosophically or religiously, sooner or later, I believe as human beings, we all have to get it through our thick skulls that we cannot do this alone. I was reading something recently, it was an observation about life, and it was making a lot of sense to me because it was making the point that most of our significant advances in life don't come through ongoing achievements or good things continuing to happen to us, but rather most meaningful moves forward in terms of our personal and spiritual growth come through collapses and things falling apart. And that's not to say that we want to, just look for those or just
or self-abuse
or self-sabotage so that things will fall apart. But when they do, when you hit those places in life where things do fall apart, and the life as you know it ceases to be. We pray that as you're looking through the wreckage, that you're finding the pieces for a foundation of something greater and brighter and bigger. And we know that some of you are in a place where you can't see that just yet. But, we pray that you will be able to find some meaning in the midst of this suffering, and it won't feel like it was all in vain.